welcome to the Knit Picks podcast. This is Lee. I'm the Knit Picks Books and Patterns graphic designer, and here as usual with my friend Stacey.
Hi, I'm Stacey. I'm the outreach director at Knit Picks, as I have been for many years now. I was realizing that this week. So
I just hit my 5-year anniversary at Knit Picks a couple weeks ago.
Oh, that's right.
Or like a week ago or something. Yeah.
We are old hands now.
5 years. Yeah, haven't been doing the books and patterns for quite that time. For about 6 months, I was doing the emails, and then I switched to books.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
million. Well, we're glad to have you on the book side.
Yeah, me too. That's my favorite place to be.
So, what have you been up to?
Oh, lots of knitting. It's that.
Yeah, it's the weather. Tis the season. It's been like perfect fall weather outside.
Oh, it's so nice today too. It's warm. It's like warmer than it should be. But anyway, I'm working on my Swish Pops cardigan, which I talked about last time.
Yay.
I started the sleeves just because the sleeves are plain stockinette, and I just like wanted something I could knit to like movies with subtitles, and like I can't do the chart pattern. I have to look down a lot. So I was like, oh, if I start the sleeves, I can be knitting the sleeves and the back at the same time and kind of go back and forth depending on what I'm doing at the same time.
Oh, that's good.
So so I got that on the needles now. I started a new sweater, which I absolutely have no business doing, but I'll explain why. I have a reason. I do. I like having a movie theater project, and I'm super picky with what I am, physically able to do in a movie theater, which is stockinette around and around and around, no needle changing, no stitch markers, no turning, no patterning. That's all I can do. If there's even just like stitch markers, I'll be like paranoid I'm going to drop them or something, right? So I can only do like the body of a sweater in plain stockinette. And my current one I have going, I've actually been to like 5 movies in the last couple of months. So I'm almost done with the body. So I need a new one. I need to replace it with a new movie theater sweater. So I was like, well, I definitely shouldn't be casting a new sweater, but I need a movie theater sweater. So
that's a good enough reason.
Yeah, I think it's good. So I, of course, fell in love with the Hawthorne DK that recently came into the office. And that seemed like the perfect movie theater sweater yarn because DK, for me, is a really good weight to like knit without looking. It's like a very like easy to knit with weight, and it's super twisty, so I'm not likely to like split a stitch if I'm not looking. It's kind of the perfect yarn to just knit without looking for me. So I'm gonna do a stripy sweater. I picked out 7 different colors that all go together. And my plan is, I've done this once before. I'll link to it in the show notes. I did a stripy sweater as a movie theater sweater years ago, and what I did was each stripe is a movie. So I start a new stripe when I go to a new movie, and then I knit for the whole movie, and then I switch to a new color for the next movie. So then in my Ravelry project notes, I can write each of the movies, which corresponds with each of the stripes. So that's my plan.
So if there's a really suspenseful movie, do you get really tight with your knitting?
Yeah. You can see if I go to a 3-hour movie like Oppenheimer, so then it's an extra wide stripe.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty boring when it comes to, we were talking about this in the office this week, because I have a movie theater project, but mine's just socks. And but it lives in my car, so I could just, because we almost always drive to movie theaters because there's not one really close that's easy to get to. So I just throw it in there, and then I just remember to grab it before I go into the theater. And it's just socks. And I get when you're saying you don't want to, I never really drop my stitches because I'm logic looping them, but I do drop stitches like a ridiculous amount. And in fact, in the car, we went to the movies over the weekend, and I'm in the car afterwards, and I'm like, oh shoot. So I'm like trying to fix it in the car so it can stay in the car so I don't ever forget it. But yeah, but they're just socks, and I don't want any drop stitches, but I don't really care if there's like weird skipped stitches or anything. But yeah, that's awesome. I know, I saw the color. I actually knew what you were knitting because I saw you pick out the colors, and it was very exciting.
Yeah. Oh, so it's all, I'll say what it is. the color theme or whatever. It's basically all the shades of green.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a
Foster Powell.
Foster Powell's is one I named, and that's my favorite. There's like a greenish yellow, so it's like yellow but towards green. I think that's cattail. And then there's some that are more blue, but blue that has like a little bit of green in them. And then I did pick the one that's more like the yellow orangey, like gold, like dark gold kind of. It's not really a green, and that's gonna be I'm gonna do the bottom ribbing in that color, so it's more of like a contrast. I think it looks nice.
Did you figure out which pattern you were gonna do?
No. So I'm actually choosing between two patterns based on my gauge, because I found two patterns that both of them I want to make. They have the same stitch gauge, but they have different row gauge. So I actually knit my swatch last night at my knit night at my friend's house, and I finished it and I have to block it still. So when I block it, I'm going to measure the row gauge, and then the row gauge will tell me which pattern I'm using. That's my plan. If I'm halfway between the two, then I'm not sure what I'm going to do. We'll see.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've been mainly working on my Axiom, of course. We'll do a check-in in a minute. We'll grab Andi to join us. But I've been trying to I've been working on my movie theater socks, which they go much more slowly. So, and then I've been looking for some small projects, and I think I'll just kind of mention mine when we go into, we're going to talk about Déjà Yarn today, which is our new collection, and it's a fun small project collection. So I'll kind of talk about that when I get there. But anyway, Andi, do you want to jump on and talk about Axiom?
Hello. My Axiom progress is a little sad.
Well, you've been busy. We'll give a little sneak peek to the podcast audience, is that you are designing a few sweaters to be on the website. So
I'm working on a cardigan using one of the new yarns we're gonna have coming out in a couple weeks, maybe just a week when this podcast comes out. But
oh gosh,
very soon. I need to finish it. So my Axiom has been kind of on the back burner. I worked on it during meetings. I got all of my ribbing finished and one cable repeat, but I'm not stressing. I feel like I'm still on track because I'm making my body cropped, so that's actually quite a far along once you factor in how much of the sweater I cut out.
Good point.
Yeah, I finished the sleeves up. I think I mentioned it last time. I finished those, and then I decided to leave them on. I didn't bind off because I want to check when I finish the body and just kind of measure out from the sleeves just to see if they're long enough, because I have a problem because I have long arms and I hate sweaters that are too short. And so I want to make sure that they're long enough. So I left them on the cable, and then I started the body, and I'm doing it in one piece, like your wonderful blog post, with suggestions from that. And yeah, it's going pretty well. I'm about 3 repeats in, I think. So it's going really well. Regan, of course, is almost done.
No, he's surprisingly not, but you know who is Carlene.
Oh, well, that's the other one who's not surprised at Carly. Oh, that's right. We were in a meeting, and she had missed crossed a cable, and we all pitched in to help her figure out how to cross the cable back, to drop down and fix the cable.
Yeah, she's knitting hers in pieces, and she's just been bouncing between pieces. So she's got the stockinette going for when she wants to knit a little faster, and then the cable piece for when she focused. And she's getting it done very quickly. I think she might be the first to finish.
Carlene, she's too fast.
She's a very prolific crafter.
Yeah. I know. You know, it's funny. That's the second with Lee talking about she's switching between 2 pieces. I've never really thought about doing that. I'm always just either working on the sleeves or working on the body. I never thought to switch back and forth. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize I could. I was really far along the body, and I was like, man, I would like to just have some plain stockinette to break it up. And I was like, wait a second, I can't. Oh yeah, I can do that. I'm in charge.
Yeah, if you've got extra needles, it's extremely easy. But even if you're using an IC set, you just switch out the end caps and tips depending on what you want to work on.
Yeah, and I have plenty of cables just floating around. I always just seem to, whenever we do like an order, when one of us does an order for, I'm like, oh, just throw in a couple of cable needles for me, please, or cables, because I tend to lose mine or my cat chews on them. And I really like the black ones. I'm really partial to those. So I always want to make sure I have plenty of black cables. They make a difference, I swear. Probably not, but in my mind, they do.
I think it's just that they coordinate with every color you're knitting with. And I like it when my needles don't compete with my yarn.
That must be it. But yeah, so I've been working on it quite a bit and it's been nice. And I've had a couple of really, speaking of the blog was a few minutes ago, over the summer, you and I had a fun little blog post about reading while knitting. And I have been full into fall reading. So I've been getting a lot of knitting done with that. So definitely check it out. If you want to read while you knit or already do, we've got some tips and tricks for you on the blog that we'll link in the show notes, because it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. That topic actually came up at my knit night last night. And
I
think no one at my knit night actually does it. But there were a couple of people who were like saying they wanted to. I was like, oh, my podcast host. My co-host does. Yeah. It's impressive.
I don't know. I watch TV right now. It's like sports around the house right now because I am a baseball fan. And so we're watching a lot of the playoffs and World Series. And then it's also football, which my partner watches. So I like to read. And it's like, sports is something I can easily ignore when it's on the TV, more than like a TV show or something loud.
Same, but it's never on my TV.
Yeah. Yes, I know. But yeah, so that's why I've been reading a lot. And then there's just been a lot of really good books. So
I feel like reading and knitting is like the next step from movie theater knitting. Because like once you get knitting in the dark down, then you can just knit while looking at a book and not your knitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would need like a setup, like a tablet stand kind of setup.
Speaking of setup, I have like a couple of like flat like couch pillows that I sit next to me on the couch. And that's where I kind of prop my my e-reader up because I have a little kickstand on it, and then I knit. Problem is I'll get right into into my book and into knitting, and then suddenly my cat has decided that these pillows are her favorite spot to crawl across, because she never sits on my lap, but she likes to crawl across and sit on the couch and demand pets. So that is what I have to compete with when I'm trying to knit and read at the same time. So and I'll just like take the book off or take my knitting off and then pet her for a while, and then she'll go back to her bed. But nope. Anywho, that was a digression. Anyway, Axiom, we're still working on it.
Yeah.
So coming up, we're going to start talking about Déjà Yarn. That's our new collection. It came out about 2 weeks. When you're listening to this, about 2 weeks ago. We brought it up in the last podcast, but we wanted to save it for this one, because we have, in this episode, we have an interview with our lovely friend George. He is from 10 Hours or Less Knitting. And it was a wonderful interview. So definitely stay tuned, because he is a fascinating knitter and person. And it was a great interview. So
yeah.
Déjà Yarn.
Yeah.
This is a fun little Stashbusters type collection, as I brought up last time. And I actually looked it up. Jen came up with the name of this collection. So that it was kind of a fun, like bringing back the yarns you had put in your stash for whatever reason, like you had too many skeins left from your big project, and I was also bringing up like when you want to try a new yarn and you don't want to commit to an entire sweater, just buying a couple of skeins and then having a great, perfect small project to play with the new yarn. So, and this collection is full of them, and it was a fun collection. Do you have any favorites from it, Lee?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them I like. It's such a like wearable collection, just like things that you could just have with you in your car, in your bag to throw on when you need a layer. I really love the Prerogative cowl, which is by one of our favorites, Holly Yo.
Holly.
Because it's number 1 is knit in Wonderfluff Ombre. So it has a really fun, fuzzy, soft, and color gradient effect. And it's reversible. So
that's what I really like.
Yeah, it's like a fun, easy to memorize repeating stitch pattern. It looks really cool on the right side, and then it also looks nice on the wrong side. So if you wear cowls and you're annoyed with how they can kind of fall so the wrong side is showing, if you're not careful, this one is meant to be shown on both sides. So you can like kind of fold it over in different ways when you're wearing it.
And she has like a whole bunch of different sizing on it too. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, but it's just, it looks like a really fun to knit and fun to wear cowl. It's like it a lot.
Yeah, we had a lot of cowls in this one. My favorite actually is the cover one. It's the Irwin cowl by Claire Slade, another one of our favorites. Mm-hmm. I remember this collection meeting. It was actually, I think, one of the first ones I picked, and I fought for it because I really like the bandana look to the cowl, just because I find them so useful, like under a jacket, just to keep your core warm. And this one has such a pretty little design that looks like it's going to be really fun to knit. So we actually knit that one in Heatherly, so it might not keep you that warm because it's mainly, acrylic and wool. But I think it's a worsted weight, so it's going to look good in like so many different kinds of worsted weight yarns. I mean, high desert would be a great choice. But that one was definitely one of my favorites. And then another one, we have a pair of socks in there, and they're in DK weight. And guess what? We just released a DK weight sock yarn. We actually knit these in Swish DK, but I think they would be amazing in any of the Hawthorne DK colors. So
yeah, and it's a textured stitch pattern, which is subtle enough that you could definitely choose one of the multicolored Hawthorne DK yarns, and it's not going to compete with the stitch pattern or bury the stitch pattern in an unpleasant way. I think it would look pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too. I think not that I need another pair of socks, but I actually, we were talking about what we did and what we've been up to. I have to keep all of my woolens. I have to switch out my my summer clothes from the winter clothes because I don't have a very big closet. So I was bringing out my winter clothes and like pulling out all of my woolens. I have a lot of socks and I have a lot of hats, and I still want to make more.
It's what we do.
I know, but I'm like, I need to wear my socks. I feel like I need to wear my socks more. Maybe I need to get some new shoes that I can wear my socks more, because I feel like I don't wear them as much. But anyway.
Some like Mary Jane's, or like those boots that are see-through.
Yes, that's what I want to get. I know I think they had clogs that were like that. I should do that. But anyway, but speaking of patterns and that and hats, I decided that I don't have enough headbands though. And lo and behold, there is a really fun headband by George, who we're going to be talking to, that is amazing, and it's in Swish DK. So I'm like, you know what? I think I need a colorful headband. So I cast on for it in Swish Pops. Actually, I just cast on for it today, just because I'm just like, I need a headband. And I was talking about, I think I talked about in the interview, how much I really want to make this, because it's a really neat looking headband. So I started it. I'm about a few inches in, I'd say. So I'm very excited. We had a long meeting earlier, so I was knitting during the meeting.
I'm excited to see how that looks in Swish Pops. It's going to have a really different vibe to it than the...
Yeah, I think so too. So I'm really liking how the colors are pooling. So I'm very excited. So
cool. We'll definitely check out the Déjà Yarn book and ebook on our website to see all the patterns. There's a lot of patterns, a lot of variety. I think it's a really fun book. And this one is actually in print and ebook, which... not all of our books are anymore, but this one is. So now we're going to go to our interview with George of 10 Hours or Less. And I think it was a really great interview. I'm excited for you to hear it.
Hi, and welcome back. Lee and I are now joined by George Shaheen. He is from 10 Hours or Less Patterns, and he has 2 brand new patterns that were just released as part of our Déjà Yarn collection. And welcome, George.
Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to see you. You've been a wonderful designer to work with, and your designs have been so fabulous. So we're so excited you could join us. So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit of your history of like when you learned to knit, when you started designing, and why?
Sure. Well, I've always been fascinated by the process of making fabric. And I had an aunt who would just furiously move her fingers with a hook in between, and out would magically come fabric. And I knew she wasn't a witch. I knew she was just very, very talented with her hands. And I wanted to do that. Unfortunately, this was in the 70s, and knitting and crocheting was still considered the domain of women. So I had asked to learn, but was told that men don't crochet. But luckily, I happened to find a long discarded how to knit and how to crochet book stuffed in a bag with some yarn and a crochet hook in our living room that I assume my mother had discarded because she was a great cook, but she couldn't stitch anything to save her life. But I was someone who tended to learn very well from books. And so at the age of 12, I took the book out, and I, after many false starts, taught myself to crochet. It was very slow and very awkward. I was not the speed demon that my aunt was, but I was making fabric with my hands. And so once I learned how to do that, the power in taking string and creating something entirely different from it had me hooked. And so I decided, well, if I could teach myself to crochet, I can teach myself to knit. And so I took that same book, and there happened to be knitting needles discarded as well, and taught myself to knit. It wasn't pretty. I knitted the way I crocheted, so I kind of like slanted my body, and I stuck one knitting needle to stand straight up, and then I kind of worked the stitches off with the other needle as if I was crocheting. But I did get fabric, and once I learned how to cable, the whole world opened up. So that was at 13. And for maybe 6 months, I would kind of, go to the library and try to look at patterns. And I've always been kind of like someone who does my own thing. And I was very bored with many of the patterns that were being published. And so I decided, well, if I take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and mix it in, could I make my own design? And so to kind of shorten the story, at 13, I did design a honeycomb knitted, circular yoked baby jacket and sent it into what was then at the time in the 70s, the Bernat Yarn and Craft Company, which was in Uxbridge, Massachusetts. This is before it was sold to DMC and before it was then moved on to Spinrite in Canada. And I had sent it, and Mrs. Bernat, who was the fashion director there, asked if she could buy it. And so I remember I got $150 for that, and they didn't put it in a book. They actually made it into a kit. So I had the bug was, I was bitten, because not only could I make fabric, but I could make money. And so throughout school, I was doing freelance designing for companies, and I wasn't actually making things and just sending them unsolicited like I did that first time. It was kind of sketches and swatches, and in those days it was through the mail. And so I did that for kind of through high school. And then after high school, I got formal fashion design training at the School of Fashion Design on Newbury Street in Boston. And so it was not knit-centric. It was sewing construction, pattern drafting, fabric draping. And I did that I got trained for 2 years and realized it really wasn't my thing. I was fascinated by all the people who took to it, but it was just not my language. And so what I did is I just went into the workforce. I kind of put the needles down, the crochet hook down, went into the workforce, went into administration. Then I decided I don't want to just do administration and, for the rest of my life. So I went back to school and I got a bachelor's in organizational psychology and then a master's degree in business administration. And I went into business administration for about 10 years in Boston, which is huge with healthcare and teaching hospitals. And then right around the time I started to turn 40, I realized that I was just another cog in the system. And I didn't want to just see the next 20 years pass by in a flash. And I had luckily, it was a time that I had invested enough money and had enough appreciation in my condominium to be able to kind of semi-retire. So I decided to leave the workforce and leave the winters of Boston and move to Florida. So I moved to Florida without knowing anybody. And I'll tell you, the reason why I moved to Florida is the internet was kind of growing, and there was a site called Sperling's Best Places, and you would answer all these questions about where you would want to live based on climate, based on culture and everything, and it would spit out like the top 10 places you should move to. One of the places was Jacksonville, Florida. I'd never heard of Jacksonville, Florida, but I looked and I'm like, oh, it's near the ocean and it's in Florida, so why not? So I flew down, looked at a few houses and thought, you know what, you only live once. I have no clue about Jacksonville. I don't know anybody. So that's a great reason to just move there. So I picked up the dog, sold my condo and moved to Jacksonville, Florida. And I was 40, so there's only so much you can do. Leisure, and I like to be a productive person and I like to be creative because I think being creative is great for mental health in whatever way you're creative. And for me, my expression is fiber art. So I started to go back to designing for companies. And I came up with an idea for a book called Knit. I think it was called Knit Frozen Afghans in 10 hours or less. And I had pitched it to the American School of Needlework. And they decided that they wanted to publish that book. And so I did blankets and throws. And as you can imagine, to make them in 10 hours, it was 4 strands of yarn and like size 35 needles, which it's nice to have one project like that. I'm not sure I'd want to be doing a whole year's worth of projects on size 35 needles. But anyway, they published it. It sold a whole lot of copies. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here. And so I decided, well, let me go off and start a brand of 10 hours or less for things other than 4-stranded blankets and throws. And that was 10 years ago. And here we are.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
I was not expecting your story to start when you were 12 years old. Wow.
Yeah. And to sell a pattern when you're 13. That's that's the dream.
It was wonderful. And it was the one time in my life where I thought, I've sold a pattern. I'm only 13. I'm going to be a multimillionaire in just a few years. Life had other plans.
But
I don't think any professional knitter has ever become a multimillionaire in the history of knitting.
Spoken like someone who's been in the industry. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's for love.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So you did a lot, and you've done a lot of patterns under the 10 hours or less, correct?
I have. They're over 200. Because I didn't have a marketing department. I didn't have a marketing research department. So my marketing research was to just kind of like spit out a design every week and see which hit. Because I'm sure that you all know that, you could come up with a collection or some designs that you think, oh, these are beautiful. These are really, we've hit the sweet spot and this is going to catch fire. And there's a thud. It's total silence. And there are others where you look at it and you go, yeah, it's nice. It does the job, but it's not really going to excite anybody, and it takes off. And so what I've learned is that you just can't tell. And so I was throwing everything at the wall.
That's sounds like my job, basically. Kind of what I do. Speaking of, so we're here to talk a little bit about your patterns in Déjà Yarn. As we were talking before we started recording, we had a hard time picking which patterns we wanted from you because your submissions were so good. They were amazing. And now that you said that you went to design school and you've done submissions, you can really tell from your submissions of how much detail and how clear your idea for the design was. And any designers listening to this, that's exactly what I love to see when I get a submission, because it makes it really easy to pick the patterns and to visualize the patterns.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you submit, I think you had 4 or 5, we had a real hard time narrowing it down.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yes. So we chose 2 patterns for the collection. One, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about them. One is the rolling ribbing hat, which I remember when we got that submission, we were in love. We loved the design. We loved how the brim was kind of like a wave. And do you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with that idea?
Sure. And I want to tell you, I didn't become a multimillionaire, but getting a compliment from Stacey Winkleplet is just as good.
And you said my name correctly. That's amazing. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, the rolling ribbon cuffed hat, I sometimes have a tendency to over-design things. And so I
Lee doesn't know anything about that.
Oh, call that.
And I think that sometimes if you, say one thing that's powerful, it's better than saying 10 things that don't pack a punch. And so what I thought for this design was I really wanted to do something that looked classic and different, but could be worn every day, whether it was going to be a fashion accessory or whether it was going to be a functional accessory. It would work as both. And so what I looked for was something that had some texture to kind of bring out, for me, working with the Swish worsted, Swish has, to me, a great stitch definition. And so I thought, well, that will work well for something with the vertical lines. But I didn't want to just do something with vertical lines like a 1x1 rib, because it's just 1x1 rib.
Yeah.
So I thought, and I didn't want to do anything that had a large lace component to it, because a lot of people don't want to wear hats that are lace. They don't want to just think of it as a fashion accessory. They want it to be both. So I thought I would combine a lace stitch, which is normally done in stockinette stitch, but do it in a 1x1 ribbing, so that you could get just a little different feel. And with this pattern, it's a mock cable rib, and they kind of just undulate again and again. So it kind of has this, to me, a very mesmerizing look about it. And I also wanted to make the hat be something where, and I know this is going to sound like heresy coming from a designer, but that if your gauge is a little bit off, it's still going to fit. And so being in 1x1 rib that kind of undulates diagonally, but it has structure and it has stretch. If your gauge is a little bit looser, it's still going to fit fine. If your gauge is a little bit tighter, it's still going to fit fine. And you want to make it shorter, you want to make it longer, you can do that before you start doing the crown decreasing. So I really wanted something that would almost guarantee a good fit after investing all that time in the knitting. And so, as you said, Stacey, because of the nature of the pattern, because of the strategic increases and decreases, the bottom edge scallops. And so what I decided to do is to make it so that you could make it, it's about 11 inches long. So you can wear it just normally as it's knit with the scalloped edge down around framing your face, and it would be a slouchy hat. Or you could take about an inch, inch and a half of fabric and fold it up for a brim to have a scalloped brim, and then you would have more of a classical fit for the hat. So, you know, it covers two types of wearers, so to speak. And what I found my clients really like is that patterns that require no sewing or finishing after it's knitted. And so this is worked in the round. Once you do the crown decreases and get the last few stitches off the needle and put a tapestry needle through them to kind of cinch them up, you're done. And so that's what people like, and that's what I try to design.
It's absolutely perfect. And it was perfect for this collection too, because this is part of our Stashbusters type collections that we do about once a year. We did one last year called Scrappy that was using multiple colors. This one is just using solid colors, one color per collection, all under 200 grams, just for, you know, for gift giving, for quick projects to do. And I have to say that your hat was my favorite because I'm like, I cast on for it. I haven't finished it yet, but that's definitely one that I am making for myself because I love that it can be slouch or it can be cuffed, and it's perfect. So
I just really love that I just got 2 compliments from Stacey.
Oh.
And we're not even
compliments.
I was going to say, we're not even halfway through the podcast, so I'm very happy.
Well, Lee also loves them too. And we both really love the Art Deco Artisan. That's in Swish DK. We did it in Marine Heather. And this one was a fascinating one. I really liked the way it looked. You want to talk a little bit about that one too?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd like to ascribe some grand design inspiration to this, but basically, for the most part, headbands bore me. And so I don't want to just kind of cast on, knit it straight, cast off, and that it's like, yeah, whatever. So I thought, I'm going to have some fun. I'm not going to think about what would sell, what would impress the people at Knit Picks. I'm just going to have some fun and see if I can, you know, manipulate some increases and decreases to get. Actually, I didn't know what I was doing. I figured, let me just swatch. Let me swatch.
It looks so great.
Let me swatch it and see if I can get inspired by the swatch. And so what I did is as you can see by the pictures, this is a combination of half fisherman's rib alternating with garter stitch. And through the use of strategic increases and decreases, those half fisherman's rib columns also undulate and kind of open up at the front to kind of frame the face. And so once I did the swatch and thought, oh, this may not be as boring a headband as I thought it might be, then I started to kind of chart out the design. And I said, oh, I want this column to kind of to disappear. I want the bottom column to disappear under the mid column, and then the mid column to kind of cross over the top column. And so that was basically it. And I liked it from a knitting engineering standpoint, but I really had no clue that you would pick it. And so when you picked it, I was like, oh, they get the engineering behind the knitting.
Yeah. I tend to go for those kind of patterns. I'm like, oh, this has some thought behind it. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, and then I looked at it and I'm like, that's not a boring pattern. Mm-hmm. And so this is, This again, here I go with the designer heresy. Again, another pattern that if your gauge is a little bit off, if it's a little bit tight, if it's a little bit loose, you're going to be pretty fine. And that's because it's worked in sideways rows. And the pattern, you work to X number of inches before you're doing a certain shaping, and then you do X number of inches before you do other shaping. So you're really working by measurement as opposed to row count. And so as long as you get the end measurement of, I believe it's 18 inches, then you should be fine. I think maybe 18 or 16, either one. And you should be fine. And so that's another pattern that if you like the challenge of increasing and decreasing, I think this pattern will prevent you from being bored.
And because of the construction, the way that you explained it, and the inches are what fits around the head, I'm guessing that you could even knit it in maybe like a fingering weight to get like a thinner headband, or like a worsted weight to get a heavier headband, and either way it's going to fit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sounds like a good use of sock yarn stash busting too.
Lee, knit in fingering weight? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I might not do it, but I imagine it would look really nice if someone wanted to do it.
I like your thinking. Maybe we should talk about your designing now. What other changes would you make to my patterns, Lee?
It's perfect just the way it is. But if someone wanted a skinny headband, that's an option.
No. Yeah, what really attracted us to this is, like you said about headbands, they can be kind of uninteresting in some ways. And, I wear headbands. A lot of people in the office wear headbands. A lot of people I know wear headbands. But finding a good knit one that's interesting to knit as well is very rare. So, that's one of the reasons we really like this pattern. So, that's very exciting. And then we couldn't just stop there, but we had another pattern chosen by you for our 12 weeks of gifting. This is a inside scoop for our listeners. Our 12 weeks of gifting is ongoing right now. And in about a month, we'll have another really lovely pattern by you that's going to be perfect for gift giving and fits right in with your motto of 10 hours or less, I think. So stay tuned, listeners.
And as a brief hint, I will say that of the 3 patterns that you accepted, this is the one that's upcoming that people won't be able to see right now is my absolute favorite.
Oh, cool.
And it's been photographed beautifully by your team.
Yeah. I will pass that along to our photography team. They'll be very excited.
So we obviously had a great time working with you on these patterns. And when we invited you onto this podcast, we didn't know much about you. So we did a little bit of research, and we learned that you are an active moderator member of the Indie Designer Gift Along that happens every year on Ravelry, which I was excited to learn because I used to be a participating designer in that myself in my pre-knit picks days. So I was like, oh yeah, that's a great thing. Yeah. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, the Indie Design Gift Along is still going strong. This year will be the 11th year that it is put on. I'm one of 30 moderators, and it is an annual knit and crochet along that focuses on holiday gift making using the patterns of independent knit and crochet designers. And it takes place during the last 6 weeks of each year on Ravelry. So if Ravelry is accessible to you, it would be a great opportunity to kind of check that out. Last year, we had over 200 participating designers, including 8 of the 14 designers that are currently featured in the Knit Picks Déjà Yarn collection. So that really kind of got me excited when I saw the Déjà Yarn collection, and I saw many familiar names,
Awesome.
many of whom I'm very fond of and I work closely with. And 4 of those designers, including myself, are actually on the moderator team of the Gift Along and have been for many years. and it's really a great event, a great team. It's primarily to promote independent pattern designers. And it usually kicks off the week of Thanksgiving with a week-long sale of select patterns from each of the participating designers. And for that week, those patterns are discounted by 25%. So it starts off with a sale, and then it actually consists of 8 along threads within the Indie Gift Along group. And those threads are the knit along, crochet alongs, and each has a specific category. It could be, one is like scarves, neckwear, one is socks, legwear, another is like sweaters and other garments. And that's where people, depending on what your level of comfort is, we have some people that they're unsure about their yarn, and they'll post pictures of, I'm thinking of using this yarn for this pattern or this yarn for this pattern. What do you all think? And then other participants and moderators will chime in. Oh, I like this color, or maybe you'll use this. Maybe have you thought of, using this fiber? And then they post their progress, and it's kind of a great support for people who are knitting and crocheting through the holidays. The focus is on gift making, but it really is just making for the, so it doesn't have to be a gift. We kind of say, if you gift it to yourself, it's a gift. And so you have the 8 threads, which are the alongs, and then there are other threads, which are non-along threads associated with general chat, sharing recipes. We have a yarn chicken thread where people post, I won, I lost, and everyone applauds, and it's great. There are game threads, because throughout the gift along, we award free pattern codes that we get from the participating designers. So to participate as a designer, in addition to signing up, the only thing you have to offer us are 6 free pattern codes for patterns in your Ravelry store. And we take those codes and we give them out throughout the event. We might have, someone might post a question, a moderator might say, Stacey, can you tell me Lee Meredith's most popular shawl pattern in her Ravelry store? And then they'll go and they'll post the answer, and they'll say, wonderful, you just won a free pattern code to, designer Andi Satterlund's Ravelry store. And so so if you think of having over 200 designers and 600 pattern codes, six pattern codes for each designer, that's 1,200 pattern codes that we give away throughout the 6 weeks. In addition to that, we have game threads, and I happen to be the co-host of the Designer Alphabet Soup game, where we take the names of each of the participating designers and we scramble it up, and participants, by private message, send in their answer. And so I might post something like, let's say Stacey is going to be the Stacey Winklepleck is going to be the answer. She's a participating designer. So I might post a clue that says, spiky necklace welt. And
that's my new username.
There you go. And so I say, here's the clue. Which designer is this? The 5th correct answer gets a free pattern code. So I go through my messages. I look for the right answer. I say, okay, congratulations, Jane Smith. You've won a free pattern code to this designer. And then I move on and say, okay, if the answer is going to be Andi Satterlund, the clue might be nudist rental ad. And I say, okay, here's the clue. Tell me which designer this is. And for Lee, we're not going to forget you. You are going to be the very respectable mitered heel.
Oh, that works.
And so I co-host with a wonderful, wonderful moderator, Carol, and so we kind of share the duties. The really professional, proper clues come from her. The really adolescent, off-color ones come from me. So we make a really great team. So that's what I'll be doing for the next 6 weeks. I won't be designing. Well, actually, the last 6 weeks of the year, I won't be designing. I'll be helping moderate with the other 30 wonderful designers on the mod team. And then to close everything out on New Year's Eve day, the entire day, we're giving away things. We're giving away free codes. There are also physical prizes that get given out by, I think, random number generators. And then at the closing of the gal, there is the Ultimate Gifting Challenge, and that's a judge competition. We on the moderating team judge it for anyone who has completed one project in each of the 8 CAL categories. And believe it or not, we do have usually it's about 24 participants who have completed a project in each of the categories, including the sweater category, and then they win the ultimate prize, which is a pattern code from each of the participating designers, which last year it totaled 230 free pattern codes. And so the winner won that, and we stand up and applaud and say, all right, get going. You're going to have a lot of knitting and crocheting to do with all those patterns. So I would invite everyone who thinks they might be interested to kind of check it out. And you're not required to participate in anything. You're not required to actually do any projects to take advantage of the games or the chat or anything. It's a very kind of laid back and enjoyable event. And we have people from all over the world who participate, both as designers as well as knitters and crocheters. So we're looking forward to another great year.
Awesome. We should say, if you out there listening are an indie designer and you want to participate as a designer, definitely look into it sooner, because I know from having participated in the past that there's kind of a sign-up process. You got to make sure you get in on time to officially become a participating designer.
Absolutely. So the beginning of November, if you're a designer, now the requirements are you must have at least 20 self-published patterns for sale in your Ravelry store. That is the minimum. If you meet that qualification, then please consider becoming a participating designer. I will provide you all with my Ravelry ID, which is 10 hours or less, but I'm sure you could have a link. You can put a link to it.
We'll link to everything in the show notes.
Great. Yep. And if there are listeners who are a little unsure, or they're having a hard time finding where the forum is, they're more than welcome to kind of, send me a message on Ravelry and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. I'm a little unclear. I would like to be a participant, or I would like to be a designer. Can you direct me to the appropriate forum? And then I will send them a link, and then they can take it from there.
Cool. Yeah, I do recommend participating. I had a lot of fun doing it back in my indie designer days. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for getting into that. I think that's fun that it has that crossover with a lot of our Knitpicks designers that we work with, and it's outside of Knitpicks. But if you are a Knitpicks fan, I bet you will become an indie gift along fan as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So we talked a little bit about how to contact you on Ravelry. Are there other places in social media land that you are available? So if we can find your stuff again.
Well, I do sell my patterns on Ravelry, and again, my ID is 10 hours or less. For those who are unable to access Ravelry, I do sell the entire library of my patterns is also available on Lovecrafts. I do have 10 hours or less does have an Instagram page, which is 10 hours or less, and that pretty much covers it.
Just in case people want to get in touch with you and after listening to this podcast, because and to find out your other design work, not just Knitpick stuff.
Well, so. Wonderful. And as I said, if there's any question that I've left unanswered, your listeners can feel free to kind of send me a message, and I'll do my best to either answer it, or if I can't answer the question, direct them to the appropriate person who can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, George. This has been a real pleasure talking to you and getting to know you.
Yeah.
Well, the pleasure's been mine.
Thank you.
This podcast was originally created by Kelly Petkin.
It is produced and hosted by me, Stacey Winklepleck, and Lee Meredith.
It's produced by Andi Satterland with additional production and editing by Chase Ryan.
Special thanks to George from 10 Hours or Less for joining us today.
We recorded this episode in the Pacific Northwest where we're watching scary movies and eating Halloween candy.
From everyone here at Nitpicks, thank you for joining us.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual participants. They do not necessarily reflect the opinions or views of the Crafts Group LLC or Premier Needle Arts.
All the yarn, tools, and patterns mentioned in this episode, along with all the inspiration a knitter could need, can be found on our website at nitpicks.com.
If you'd like to be on our podcast, leave us a voicemail. We'll be checking it regularly and using your calls in later episodes. To leave a voicemail, call 360-334-4847 and record your message. You can also record a voice memo on your phone and email us the audio file at podcast@nitpicks.com.
Like and follow us on your favorite social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube at Nitpicks.
Rate and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
Until next time, happy crafting!